Hoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it and I hope you're doing well. It's Season 4, the season where things start to become just a smidgen less believable. Now, to the series' credit, we do still get more than our fair share of down-to-earth episodes that actually have a lot of charm, but alongside them we're going to get some truly weird stories that kind of make the show as a whole genuinely shine. We're going to get more of Hank and the gang, a murder mystery, and even find out what happened to everyone's favorite character after she fell out of an airplane. So without further ado, what worked? What failed? I really think Peggy should have just bailed. We've got a lot in store as we review Season 4. The episode opens with the aftermath of Peggy's parachutes failing as she plummets to her seeming demise. However, Peggy ends up landing in a field of mud and narrowly survives with her life. That being said, her body is broken, but her spirit as the substitute Spanish teacher Peggy Hill is unwavering. Diedrich Bader appears as the doctor in this episode. I'm not going to say he guest stars because both Diedrich Bader and Phil LaMarr, who shows up as the physical therapist in the next episode, would become frequent appearances in the show, what with Diedrich Bader even being an Office Space, though he was something of a big name at the time due to his work on the Drew Carey Show. All of this while Dee Dee has just given birth to GH, aka Good Hank, and is suffering from PPD, something fierce. To the show's credit, they never mock Dee Dee for it, and they do make an effort to show the crippling nature of the affliction. Meanwhile, Hank feels an intense amount of guilt because he was the one that told Peggy to jump. He blames himself for her injuries and it eats him up inside. Which you see in the previous episode what he said. He just said it was amazing and that she had to try it. He didn't know her chute would fail, how could he? But as he thinks it over again and again and his nightmares get worse, he contorts what he said until he believes it's his fault she fell. Until Peggy says she doesn't blame him. The episode has funny moments, but it's literally just the family healing after two giant events taking place one after another. They get Peggy and GH home, and since Cotton refuses to do women's work, Bobby actually steps up to take care of GH when he can while Dee Dee recovers. When Cotton just leaves GH in the hall when he starts crying, it's Bobby who gets out of bed to go and console his new baby uncle while taking care of whatever he needs. Cotton just doesn't want to put any effort in. And in perfect juxtaposition to that, while Hank may fumble from time to time, he is taking care of Peggy as best he can. He's not perfect, but he wants Peggy to get better. Meanwhile, Peggy is grappling with survivor syndrome, where at first she's downright euphoric about surviving, but as the reality sets in, she feels powerless in her own body. There's a terrific scene where Bobby just unloads that it is not his responsibility to raise GH and that he can't be responsible for him. He's just a kid. Hank never forces Bobby to take care of GH. He never tells him he absolutely has to. Bobby chose to do it because that's just who Bobby is. I will say I wish Dee Dee had a breakthrough moment or something in the episode instead of constantly running away, but I get it. It just feels like a missed opportunity to give her any kind of character growth. And so with Cotton outside drinking with the gang, GH left with Peggy as he's screaming and she's in a full body cast, she understandably calls out for help because she feels like she can't do it on her own. But in the end, when there's no one else around, she's able to rock him with her toes and soothe him to sleep, and that's where the episode ends. Again, I wish there was just a little bit more, but you're not gonna get that perfect fairy tale narrative in real life. It's miraculous enough that Peggy survived that fall, much less makes a full recovery in just 3 episodes, so you just kinda gotta roll with it. But that's literally the entire episode. Healing. It's kind of wild comparing Season 3's premiere to Season 4's, where Season 3 is much more about healing through emotional trauma and damage, where Season 4 is much more physical. Personally, I prefer Season 3's premiere more, but this episode really makes you feel for Peggy, and at the end feels like it earns that almost return to normal moment. Peggy Hill, The Decline and Fall, is a healing 8 out of 10. Peggy is out of her cast, but her body is atrophied, having been unable to move for weeks. I will say I'm glad that she's not just hopping out of bed and running marathons after the fact, but yeah, we're still dealing with her arc, which actually goes pretty deep into the season. When she goes to physical therapy, she's basically told to exert as little effort as possible and doesn't feel like she's accomplishing anything. Meanwhile, Cotton isn't even giving her any sympathy at home and is pushing her with stories of his accomplishments in war, all while talking about needing his application finished for his spot in a military plot of land. However, when Peggy starts digging even just a little bit into Cotton's backstory, she realizes there's no way he could have been in the Eastern and Western theaters within days of each other. Seeing that his stories might be a sham, she starts to second guess everything and slips on her PT and even wants to go back to the old facility. Hank actually convinces her otherwise by explaining that Cotton lost his shins and still managed to keep going. He was torn down in war and found the will to keep fighting. Peggy helps him fill out his application and submits it so the war hero could be honored with a proper funeral plot. This episode was necessary. We needed to see Cotton's rage and fury actually used for good. Peggy starts to understand her father-in-law just a little bit more. Again, I don't think this is something that Season 1 Cotton would have done, but as we get deeper in the series, we see new angles of the man, and you can sympathize with what he had to go through and understand that he saw genuine horrors of war. Now, does that forgive everything? No, absolutely not, and it shouldn't. But even if you don't like Cotton as a character, you have to respect what he'd gone through and who he is now. Cotton's plot is an episode that shows Peggy at her absolute strongest. Here she is just months after falling from an airplane, trying to reclaim some part of her life. She's pushing herself to get better and doesn't want to lay around doing nothing. This is the Peggy that people love. This is the character we saw in the first couple seasons. Now, will it always be the case? No, absolutely not. But these two episodes make what comes later just so disappointingly jarring. Cotton's plot is an honorable 8 out of 10. Hank and the gang are listening to the Jock and Chad Sports Show, where Jock is played by the late music legend Mac Davis, and Chad is played by country music's own Clint Black, who will show up later in the season as well. Basically, a new running back is about to take Bill's all-time run record, and while Hank and the gang think this is going to absolutely destroy Bill, he's there week after week cheering the kid on to beat his record. However, when the kid gets injured and tears his ACL, they let him hobble his way to breaking the record anyway, even when he obviously couldn't do it on his own. Which, understandably, upsets Hank, especially when we find out that that was Bill's last major accomplishment before enlisting in the Army. He didn't get to go to graduation or senior dance or anything. He was in basic, which gives Hank an idea to redcoat Bill and let him try and tie the record again the right way. So they have him rejoin the football team for one last run. One last hoorah! And even as his body is breaking down, he's playing against kids half his age who could eat him alive any day of the week, and yet the man perseveres through the pain, pushes his body past its limits, and finally gets the touchdown he needed to tie the record up once more. Where Cotton's plot was necessary for Peggy and Cotton, Bill's Are Made to Be Broken was essential for Bill. While we'd seen pieces of his life in episodes like Pretty Pretty Dresses, we always saw him at his lowest. We always saw him as depressed, sad, and fat, and mocked because of it. Here we see he was a kid that loved his country, loved his friends, and was something of a local legend. He was the Billdozer. The community adored him, and seeing him have this time in the spotlight is terrific because he never sabotaged Ricky. He never wished for the kid to fail. He saw a mutual respect for what they did and the stress they put their bodies through to get to it. It's a story where I would argue no one is really in the wrong. Sure, you could argue that they shouldn't have just given it to Ricky, but it's not like it was Ricky's call to make ultimately, and they gave Bill the chance to make it right. This episode showcases that small-town, homegrown Americana that has become so ingrained into the soul of King of the Hill. You need episodes like this to show that these guys aren't complete losers. Even Bill has something that makes him stand out. Even Bill has something that makes him stand proud. Bills Are Made to Be Broken is an asterisk-free 10 out of 10. When the school needs a substitute teacher for shop class and Hank is forced to take a vacation at work, he begins volunteering his time at the school to teach the kids shop. Dennis Berkeley as Principal Moss is just perfect in this episode because he's equal parts an insufferable antagonist and just powerless in the face of the district. Meanwhile, it's time for the Substitute Teacher of the Year awards, and Peggy, having just survived falling out of a plane, is determined to win, despite having stiff competition from her husband, who is quickly becoming a school celebrity. Now, there's three key elements to this episode that make it stand out compared to all the others. 1. Hank is never more critical of Bobby or gives him favoritism of any kind in class, and Bobby doesn't expect it. They actually don't even interact all that much. He teaches him like he'd teach any other student. 2. Hank is not actively competing with Peggy, and Peggy is trying to win her award on her own merits. She's not sabotaging him to win. 3. The main conflict of the episode comes from Hank bringing his own tools into school and being kicked out for something that shouldn't be a big deal at all. Like, Hank is loved by the kids and is teaching them practical lessons so they can be better equipped to handle things on their own. It's a great episode. Now, granted, Peggy decides to run as Mrs. Hank Hill in the end so she can get more votes, but I don't know. They set up throughout the episode that she is riding high on the idea that she survived falling out of a plane, and this is the perfect way for her to get her groove back. If Hank didn't step in to help the kids, she'd understandably be a shoo-in, and Hank is never interested in taking that glory away from her. If it was a later season and Peggy did this, it would be a showcase of how far her character has fallen. Here, it feels like the perfect way to show her character growth and how she's healed in a way. I don't know. I like it as a joke here because she sees herself as a protagonist of her own story, and that works for her. Any other time, this just wouldn't be a good episode. Little Horrors of Shop is a well-crafted 9 out of 10 episode that never sticks around for too long and is just good, solid watching. Con and Min are going out of town for Con to present at a conference in Maui, and so they leave Connie with the Hills for their trip, which excites Bobby since he gets to have a sleepover with his girlfriend. Hank and Connie joke around, Connie helps with the dishes, and Bobby even starts helping out more to impress her. Everything is going great. And then Connie gets her first monthly visitor. That's it. That's the whole episode. Connie dealing with her first period, and yet there's again that emotional core that makes the episode worth watching. Not only do you see Connie struggling with hormones and lashing out at Bobby and not understanding why, you see Bobby trying to understand and struggling to fully grasp because they're still ultimately kids. You have Hank going way outside his comfort zone to get Connie the help and supplies she needs, even when he didn't do the same for Peggy. Con, the insufferable man that he is, the instant he hears what Connie is going through, he and Min both immediately fly home from Maui. That's at minimum a 9-hour flight. They wasted no time to be home and care for their daughter when she was going through something that was uprooting her whole life. You see Con be cold to Hank and the gang and mock them, but he never hesitates in his unquestioned love for Connie, and that's honestly great to see. He and Min love her more than anything. Even at the end of the episode when Connie and Bobby are talking and they reach their own compromise on what's happening, the episode just ends. There's no dynamic element that completely throws a wrench into everything. It's literally just Hank helping Connie until her parents can take over. Hank even consoles Con so he doesn't feel completely helpless. I don't know, this is a very humanizing episode for Hank, and this season as a whole has been very kind to him. He's getting a lot of episodes while also knowing what to do to get things taken care of. He could hear how scared Connie was, and he jumped down 8A to help her. The scene where she's spiraling because she doesn't have enough money to cover what she needs, and he just consoles her and tells her he'll buy everything, may seem small, but it's those small acts of kindness that matter most. Hank didn't do it for a thank you from Con or for him to owe him. He did it because he didn't want Connie suffering. It's things like that that make Hank such an endearing character most of the time. Aisle 8A is awkward intentionally. It's not supposed to be this fun, happy adventure, but by the end of it, you get that emotional closure that makes it a perfectly prescribed 9 out of 10. When Luann, the 19-year-old, opens a can of beer and wins a contest to go to New Orleans, Hank then suddenly gets to go to Nolans and either have Don Meredith, played by Don Meredith, throw the ball to win $100,000, or he can throw it himself and win $1 million. And yeah, the Hills are going to Louisiana. And I gotta say, I love that Hank builds his own beer can to practice throwing the football into to maybe win $1 million. The man practiced time and time again, and when he was confident he could do it, he decided, why not take the risk? Why not go all in? Like, we've seen Hank be the most reserved, held back guy most of his life, but now he has a shot to go big or go home, and he's welding a giant beer can to maybe make his dream a reality. I don't know, seeing him with that fire is just so beautifully written and showcased. And then we hit the only major roadblock of the episode. Bill tags along for their trip down to Nolens because the Dautrives are from Louisiana, and he decides to meet up with his family. His cousin's widows, Rose, played by Emily Strayer, Violetta, played by Natalie Maines, and Lily, played by Marty McGuire. There's also his cousin Gilbert, played by David Herman, having way too much fun with the character, and I am here for it. And of course, the matriarch of House Dautrive, Aunt Esma, played by a little-known actress by the name of Academy Award-winning screen legend Meryl Streep. If you don't say the whole thing, it just doesn't have the same weight, you know? Now, the reason it's a roadblock in my eyes is that neither story really gets the time to breathe. I would have loved if this episode was a two-parter. Instead, we get rushed through Bill trying to figure out which of the three women that are super into him is actually his cousin, while Hank battles with his inner doubt to see if he could actually throw the ball, eventually handing it over to Don Meredith, who doesn't even take off his jacket for the throw, and fails. Granted, Don had been practicing the entire time with his jacket on and didn't want to throw off his groove. But imagine how soul-crushing that would be to swallow your pride at a once-in-a-lifetime shot just to have the sure thing fail. Have him battle his yips like he did back in Season 2. Have Peggy coach him for a change. You could have fleshed the story out as an episode all its own while Bobby learns the ways of a southern gentleman from Gilbert that makes Hank throwing all of Bobby's new attire off the balcony that much more earned at the end. Give us scenes of Bill with each of the girls and being his awkward Bill self. Give us more of Aunt Esma. Give us more of all these different plots that just absurdly end with nary a whisper. The episode is not bad at all, it just could have been so much better. A beer can named Desire is a frustrating, but enjoyable 8 out of 10. Hank has smoked a turkey for Thanksgiving, where they're visiting Peggy's family in Montana this year, leaving Bill by his lonesome. Joanna Gleason would play Peggy's mom. Hank doesn't get Luann a ticket to Thanksgiving, so he has to buy one at the airport and then finds out he can't bring a tank of propane onto a plane. Who knew? Bill finds an excuse to pick up a fake uncle so he can spend time with the Hills. Dale drives John Redcorn to the airport, Boomhauer's picking up flight attendants, everyone is having a happy holiday. Anyway, some sleet shuts down the airport and Hank struggles to find a way to get the family to Montana. They end up sleeping at the airport, and all the while Peggy is coaxing Hank to break the rules to get what they need. We see Con just hopping behind a counter and serving up food for his family and stealing because he has to look out for them. And then in the morning, when they're ready to take off, they think Hank's smoked turkey is an explosive and detonate it, causing him to understandably freak out. The sleet comes down again, and Hank even lies to another family about a shuttle that could take them to their flight. Now, is that what Hank would do? He slept in an airport, he's been pushed around, he's at his wit's end, and he wants his family to have a happy Thanksgiving. He runs clear across the airport, and when he finally watches them all into the bus and looks out to see the disappointment in the eyes of the other family he had lied to, he disembarks. Remember, Hank is not an altruistic guiding light. He will mess up from time to time. He's human. But at the end of the day, more often than not, he's going to do the right thing. And as they all huddle in the airport food court, joined by their closest friends, the Rainy Street Gang make the best of their sleeted-in Thanksgiving. Happy Hanksgiving doesn't jeopardize any characters to make the episode work. Sure, it walks back Hank caring about Luann, but not in a way that's downright malicious. He doesn't even need more convincing than he gets to get her a ticket the day of. A family snowed in an airport is probably the most cliche trope of sitcom writing, but it works because they've taken the time to make the characters believable. We get a great little side adventures with everyone, and honestly, it's a fantastic holiday outing and a smoky TSA regulation 9 out of 10. Hank and the gang get a backhoe to install an industrial septic tank at Bill's house. Bill, my guy, are you okay? However, as the gang loses control of the project and Dale drives the hoe into the side of Bill's house, Hank needs to go and decompress at Megalomart and get an L-pipe when he hears an equally frustrated lover of hard work yelling at another retail associate. Hal, played by now Price is Right game show host and then star of The Drew Carey Show, you guessed it, Drew Carey. I'll probably never review The Drew Carey Show, but just know, The Drew Carey Show was Americana to the Midwest as King of the Hill was to the South. And that is no small part due to Drew Carey's outstanding delivery and personality, which shines through in his voice work for this episode. And so yeah, Hank and Hal become friends and the gang gets jealous. It's an episode about guy love, that's all it is. I'm not entirely sure, but the music in the bar when they're drinking, I'm almost confident is Drew Carey singing, which is an extra added fun touch. I mean, you get Hank and Hal jamming out while Bill and Dale spy on them, and there's a lot of charm to Hank having someone he can actually bond with. Dale and Bill are just morons in the best dumb way, and it's great to see the two hanging out and actually bonding together. When they ask Hank to pick between them and Hal, he picks Hal, and they decide to take the backhoe and train to win their friend back. They end up burying themselves in a pet cemetery like only they can. We also get our first reveal of Spaghetti and Meatballs! Yum yum! Jimsy is played by Dave Thomas, who keeps popping up in the show, and it's just a nice touch. Anyway, Hank finds the two stuck and helps them get free. It's nice to see Dale and Bill bonding after they've been beating each other up constantly through the show, and it really shows they're friends and just have a weird way of showing it. I don't know, I wish we got more of Hal, and I get why we don't, but it's just kind of tragic Hank doesn't have someone that he can bond with other than the gang. Not in My Backhoe is a W-shaped 8 out of 10. Lady Bird doesn't want to play and only listens to Hank. Bobby finds a raccoon and decides to start feeding it. We all make mistakes when we see a trash panda in need. And so Bobby joins his new friend Bandit for a trash can feast, which is actually pretty wholesome in its own way. He then starts letting the raccoon live in the garage, and Dale gets sent to take care of it. He fails, and Lady Bird fights with the raccoon, who bites both her and Dale. Lady Bird then runs off, and they have to find her. Dale starts to believe he's developed rabies because he's a hypochondriac that worries about everything, and that's the episode. Dale, Lady Bird, and Bandit are out in the wild and need to be tracked down. I mean, it's a Dale episode. On the one hand, it's touching to see how much Hank absolutely loves Lady Bird, and you actually see him cry over her missing, but then they're captured by Rabies Dale, who's going to drain their blood to replace his infected blood, and through that also learn about propane and propane accessories. I don't know, man. I usually enjoy Dale episodes, but this one is just insufferable. This may be the weakest episode of the season. It's not even because of Hank or Bobby or anything. It's literally just Dale. If you take Dale out of the equation and focus on the story of just Hank and Bobby understanding the bonding of pets and companionship, I think it would have been substantially stronger. Even when Bobby has the gun and is ready to take the shot, he takes out Bandit instead of Lady Bird because he thought he was going to attack. If you take the naked Screeching Man out of the episode, there is some emotional integrity to be appreciated there. It just feels like Dale detracts from everything on display. To kill a Lady Bird is a perfectly tolerable but bogged down 5 out of 10. Ah yes, one of the most dated episodes of the entire show. You see, back in 1999, there was a fear of Y2K. Basically, computers registered year valuations in 2 digits. So when the year 1999 shortened to 99 rolled over to 2000, or just zeros, no one knew what was going to happen and feared the worst. Remember, we were largely using analog technology and even analog TV broadcast until about 2009. As such, a lot of people and companies feared that Y2K was going to be the fall of man as all technology as we knew it failed or short-circuited. Computer stores would even sell computers that were Y2K proof. The problem? Literally any computer is Y2K proof. As someone that remembers the turn of the millennia, it really was one of the wildest conspiracies known to man. This episode focuses on that. Basically, it's our Christmas episode, and as the entire town freaks out over the incoming disaster that is Y2K, where even our nukes would fail and fire all willy-nilly, they start panic buying. Fun fact, our nuclear program still uses floppy disks. And yeah, that's the episode. Hank navigating the Y2K fear-mongering while trying to keep his family intact. Even when a propane shortage rattles him, he tries to keep a level head and looks towards the future, terrified of what may happen to his family, but ready to face the danger together. Sure, instead of getting Peggy the computer she wanted, he gets her a giant clock, because he's, practical about that stuff, but it just, I don't know. The further detached we get from the time period, the more this episode may seem foreign to a lot of people. But it was a genuine fear a non-zero amount of people actually had. Sure, doomsday prepping is a very real thing now, but back then it was still very much in its infancy of being mainstream. Helenium is an episode that closed the blast doors and locked itself as a time capsule to a long-forgotten panic. And I mean, the episode came out in December of '99. They weren't making this episode on the other side of Y2K. That's the most important thing. They made it with the hope that everything would be okay and that things would continue business as usual. The episode is great, packed full of terrific jokes and satire, while also not totally invalidating people's fears. It did everything it needed to for its time and is honestly a great example of an episode that's a product of its time, but still great to see. Helenium is an end of days grade 9 out of 10. Despite getting a brand new computer in the last episode, Peggy is still using her broken computer, which wouldn't be such an issue if it wasn't such a big part of the previous episode. Meanwhile, Bill sees the flag he saluted for nearly 20 years being ready to be ceremoniously burned and properly retired when he decides to give it a loving home like the patriot he is. We also get the new substitute teacher, Peggy Donovan, played by guest star and acting legend Heather Locklear of Melrose Place and Spin City fame. Bobby gets an F on his English paper, and he speaks English. How is that possible? Bobby looks outside and sees Bill's flag and gets inspired to write about his love of America. However, Peggy starts to write his paper for him while Bobby games and does all the work. When Peggy keeps floating around to see what happens with the paper, Mrs. Donovan returns an A paper and it goes straight to Bobby's head. Peggy, jealous of her son and with her musings being rejected, starts to spiral until she admits that she wrote the essay. I'll say this. Hank is 100% in the right here. Peggy should have never written the paper, and Bobby should have never taken credit for it. Meanwhile, Khan tries to take down Bill's flag that's blocking out the sun and unleashes the patriotic beast that Bill is. Bobby starts stealing Peggy's musings to help his friends and basically just admits to plagiarism. Yeah, they both deserve it. Like, sure, Mrs. Donovan could have been softer with the delivery, but she was justifiably upset. And again, Hank is the voice of reason without being overbearing about it. He didn't rat them out, but he sure didn't offer them any quarter either. Peggy and Bobby try to scheme, and when Peggy backs up over the flag, they shred the tire marked Majesty. Basically, Peggy has Bobby help her commit a felony and set off the fire alarms in the process. Poor Bill in all of this. Bill has watched the flag he loved just get mutilated as two people try and hide their shame. I don't know. I feel bad celebrating what Peggy was doing earlier in the season after everything she's been through, because this is just not how you do it. You see her spiraling and it just doesn't work. Sure, you find out that Mrs. Donovan was ready to watch Peggy fail, but and? It's not like she did any intense snooping to figure out they did it. She was literally reading the paper. It's a bold episode that makes me dislike Peggy and feel sympathy for Bill in the same strokes. Old Glory is a proud flying, but overall lackluster 6 out of 10. Hank takes Bobby out on a propane run to a ranch where he gets inspired to take Bobby to the rodeo. And so Hank starts to train him to be a solid wrangler and even lassos a wild Bill. Hank is really excited for Bobby to go to the rodeo and be a true and proper wrangler. Remember when Bobby loves stand-up comedy and loves performing for people? Hank sure doesn't. Yeah, Bobby falls in love with being a rodeo clown instead of being a wrangler. It reminds me a lot of Husky Bobby, except I imagine his passion would be more welcomed here. Like they serve a purpose and help de-escalate situations at the rodeo. I mean, Bobby walks into that trailer with the confidence of a true comedian. I don't know, in Husky Bobby was being flaunted for being on the heavier side. Here it's his genuine talent and comedic wit on display. But of course, clowns are looked down upon and Hank is ashamed, while Dale couldn't be prouder of all of Joseph's accomplishments, even having Joseph win buckle after buckle until he says he doesn't even know who Bobby is to hang with the other cowboys. Bobby never jeopardizes who he is. He never changed. He has always been the same goofy kid who just wanted to entertain people, and even in the end, when Hank helps him dress up to save Joseph, you never feel like there's a proper resolution that celebrates all of his hard work. Bobby didn't do anything wrong. He didn't commit some heinous crime. He saved Joseph and put on a show. I don't know. I really like Bobby in this episode, even if the episode as a whole is just sort of sped through and, fine. It's a background filler episode that doesn't really go anywhere, but at least it's believable for all the characters. Rodeo Days is a bucking bronco of a 7 out of 10. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I swear he has used that joke for the last 3 seasons, and you see the evolution of a joke in real time as he tries to find a way to make it work. It's a weird bit of continuity, and I'm gonna be sad to see it go. But we need a lighthearted John of an episode like this before we turn into our next big 2-parter. It's the first time we see the Blue Flame of Valor being awarded. We also see that Buck is very obviously having an affair with Debbie. But sure enough, Hank wins the Blue Flame of Valor award. We also learn that Buck found Hank working at a jeans store and gave him the dream he never knew he had: selling propane and propane accessories. However, halfway through his acceptance speech, Ms. Liz Strickland barges in and kicks Buck out of their homes after finding him and Debbie necking. Let's just get this out of the way right now. This is a jam-packed episode full of talent. Not only would Debbie be played by Reese Witherspoon, we also get the late great Lane Smith playing the propane chairman Charlie Fortner, and of course Ms. Liz played by legend of screen and stage, one Kathleen Turner, aka the villain from the critical darling Baby Geniuses opposite Christopher Lloyd. That was a joke, in case you needed me to say that. She's timeless. Anyway, because Texas has an asset seizure procedure, Buck sells Sugarfoots to Hank for just a few bucks so that Liz can't come after it in the divorce. Peggy then believes she owns half of Sugarfoots and decides to be more hands-on with her new establishment. We also get the return of Phil Hendry as Liz's defense attorney, Jewel Crawford, which I swear, man could read the phone book and make the pages sing. Miss Liz then takes over Strickland Propane and counts on Hank as her #1 confidant. We also get to meet the Sugarfoots crew, including the absolute legend, Little John. There's just a lot here to love. Hank visits Buck at the singles apartment where we meet Debbie's roommate, Gail, an absolute legend of a person who spends his days buying Hot Wheels off eBay. Liz starts buttering up Hank, even giving him his dream position as manager. However, she has other schemes afoot. A Sugarfoot, if you will. Yeah, she tries to seduce Hank and fails spectacularly because that's who he is. Naturally, Debbie decides to try and seduce Hank and blackmail him into keeping her safe from Ms. Liz. However, when she gets violent, he speeds off only to be confronted by Buck. Hank tries to get Liz and Buck at Sugarfoots to make peace, and then Debbie calls to set Hank up, so he promises to head over and take care of it. Peggy hears a loud bang in the back of Sugarfoots and finds Debbie shot in a dumpster as "To Be Continued" floats across the bottom of the screen. Like, okay, I don't think I can get too into the episode without looking at the second part, but talk about one hell of a rising action. There's so much I want to say, but we gotta get through the next one. Alright, so Debbie is in the dumpster, she's not moving, she is done. Hank is hanging out with Gail as he tries to buy a Weevil and lights up. Hank tries to use a cigarette to light his own when he finds out that he has consumed the devil's lettuce. He begins to panic, fearing he's gotten too high and that truly this is the end of days. We also meet the sheriff, played by Mac Davis, who we heard back in Bills Were Made to Be Broken. We also get the Texas Rangers called in, where the agent is played by returning great Phil Lamar. Hank then gets roped in as he starts to panic. Debbie was found with Ms. Liz's gun, and Hank struggles to play it cool, just looking as suspicious as humanly possible. Buck and Ms. Liz reconcile, and Buck is back in business. We also saw Hank's name tag had been torn off his shirt and planted by the Debbie dumpster. Hank thinks he's totally blacked out on the Mary Jane and committed a murder. Dun dun dun. Buck slips a shotgun shell into Hank's truck while wearing a wire to try and catch him red-handed to get the heat off Buck. Like, if it was any other time or any other character, this would just be hokey, but Hank is just so earnest about it all that it makes it perfect. Khan asks for Hank's autograph and gives him a Jimmy Neutron brain blast and figures out that there was no way he could have ever messed with Debbie. Hank comes clean at Sugarfoots and admits that he was with Gail. And right as Buck is about to be arrested, the Ranger steps in and reveals what happened. Debbie wasn't murdered. She went to the get in, get out, grabbed some nachos, a big gulp, and when she was climbing into the dumpster, the gun misfired and bing bang boom, she sunset herself. And all was right with the world. The family jokes and Hank is banned from mowing the lawn for 1 week. What a roller coaster 2-parter. It really makes me wish A Beer Can Named Desire was a two-parter as well, because this may be one of the strongest narratives of the entire show. I mean, these 2 episodes are probably the closest we'd ever get to a King of the Hill movie, and they're just phenomenal. Outside of just downright amazing voice work from both established voice actors and accomplished film actors of their own right, we get the sharpest jokes, dialogue, and honestly some of the best music of the series yet. There's an undercurrent of comedy that manages to undercut and yet somehow elevate the suspense. You know Hank didn't do it, there's just no way it would be possible. But Buck? Ms. Liz? Oh, they're fair game. But even they aren't shown as blatant red herrings. They have their own independent motivations that make it work that much more. This two-parter is not the funniest King of the Hill has ever been, but it's definitely some of the best it'll ever be written. Like, this is some of the finest King of the Hill you could ever show someone. If you look at the 2 episodes in a vacuum of a perfectly concise narrative that needs no extra explanation or setup, you know who everyone is either through context clues or them just straight telling you. You know the players, the stakes, and how far the characters will go to defend their good names. Like, I know I'm rambling, sure, fine, whatever, but it has to be said that episodes like this elevate the idea of adult animation as a whole. Remember, before The Simpsons or King of the Hill, there was just some very thin, slim Ralph Bakshi-shaped pickings to choose from when it came to adult animation. It would explode in popularity in the 2000s, absolutely, and be the powerhouse it is today, but the medium owes no small part of that to these 2 episodes. These showed the possibility of the medium. These episodes need to be seen, appreciated, respected, seen again, and then sober up and watch them a 3rd time. 100 out of 10. Truly a masterclass in everything that animation can be. Bobby sees Luann naked at a picnic and Joseph wants the hot deets. I feel like there's some cosmic irony to having naked ambition right after high anxiety, because I mean, really? You build up all this goodwill and then bam! An episode that would be better off 2 seasons ago. The most frustrating part is that there's actually good stuff to the episode. Boomhauer passing out in his tube and waking up as he wanders around his city before getting sent to a mental hospital, and Dale of all people can understand him and goes to get him out and ends up getting brought in too. That's great! Connie hasn't told her parents she and Bobby are dating and promises she will, and finds she's self-conscious about her chest after finding out about the Luann thing. Bobby tries to defend Luann from Joseph, who's just obsessive in the worst way. I personally hate when stories are dependent on miscommunication for a narrative to move forward. We also get, I think, the first appearance of the Wasana song, so that's neat, I guess. Genuinely, the gang's side story is one of the most genuinely funny adventures they've been on yet, and it's a shame it's to the service of this episode. The Connie and Bobby stuff just spirals and gets real awkward real fast. The Joseph stuff is just, man, they speedrun making that kid insufferable. On the one hand, love how the gang refuses to just call Hank to get them out of the ward, even though, sure enough, he eventually gets that call. Though I will say I do love that Hank supports Bobby in trying to see Connie and is even proud of him. I don't know, the episode seems to lose the plot halfway through and just doesn't pick it back up. Naked Ambition is a bare 5 out of 10. Pops collapses on his mower, and now a new house is for sale! Hank and the gang want to turn it into a clubhouse, but it already has an owner. Luann, who's tired of living under Hank's house rules. Hank is naturally proud and is more than eager to have her out. Luann gets 3 roommates to help cover the cost, and man, they are absolute legends. Tanya, played by Maura Tierney of ER and Liar Liar, Kate, played by Vicki Lewis of News Radio fame, and Griffin, played by Andy Dick, famous for... oh, just Google him, you'll go for a ride. And yeah, no, they're just absolutely horrible roommates that abuse Luann's naivete and kindness. You really feel for her as she struggles to keep everything under control and realizes that she's becoming Hank with all of her rules and desire for order. Hank tries to console her and talks about the menial tasks and projects that bring him back to his center. Luann tries to be as passive-aggressive as possible to get them to do something, anything to help out, and when she starts cleaning a pool, she starts to find her zen. And as Hank and Luann sit on the edge of the pool sipping a beer, the episode pans out, only to have Topsy and Cotton attack her roommates. When I was a kid, I hated this episode. It seemed like just a bunch of nonsense, and it wasn't relatable in the slightest. And then I got horrible roommates. Then I found myself cleaning up after people and realized those little projects really are what keep you sane. You ever reset the wood on the door under your sink with wood glue and clamps? I'm no handyman, but that was downright therapeutic to see the actual fruits of your labor. Moving on up is bittersweet. It feels rushed in a way to have Luann so abruptly moved out of the Hill house and across the street, but she's growing up and deserves a space of her own, even if it won't be mentioned too much in the future. That being said, I just wish we got more Luann growth here. Each Luann episode previously gave us something more to her character, and almost feels like she's been dialed back this season so she doesn't get in the way. Of course, Brittany Murphy does a great performance like always, and it shows why she was a cut above, but it just seemed to drag in the middle when there could have been better scenes than Boomhauer playing with a spider or the gang coming up with a secret knock. Moving on up is a packed up 7 out of 10. Hot take, this is when Peggy really starts slipping. Peggy is in her office/storage closet lamenting how she misses being a manager at Sugarfoots, where even in the most generous timelines, she ran it for at most a month. A little power goes straight to her head time and time again. Now, she's looking at classifieds under a neon Peggy sign, trying to find her new venture because, of course she is. She misses telling people what to do. Like what? Anyway, she gets wrapped up in an energy bar triangle-shaped business that is not manipulative at all. She's introduced to the fast-paced world of top-down marketing by Lainey, played by Terry Garr. And yeah, no, Peggy is a dream MLM member. The funniest part is, it's not even the only time she gets roped into an MLM, which is wild. She's just that gullible. Granted, things were different 20 years ago, and that information was much less available back then, but still, Peggy is gullible. She's very, very gullible. She starts using the family to sell her energy bars, and when they can't move product like she needs to, she turns to the man she hates almost as much as Cotton, and honestly, kinda justifiably so in a lot of points, Bill. Also, we get Dale apologizing for his Y2K freakout, and it might be my favorite lines Johnny Hardwick ever delivers. He's just so hat in hand about it, it's delightful. And so yeah, Bill is great at selling bars, and despite Peggy being literally disgusted by him, she works him to the bone to move as much product as possible by preying on his weakness and lack of self-esteem. He starts selling it all over the base and getting them to fly like hotcakes. He gets invited to San Antonio as a diamond-level salesman, and Peggy gets greedy and wants him to double down to make it to Nationals, which is basically exactly the same in the exact same room. Hank breaks the family rule, and they eat dinner in the living room. Exciting things are happening over at Hill House. And when Peggy shows Bill even an iota of kindness, he runs off in fear. Hank even gives Peggy help by telling her that Bill is only motivated by tragedy and likes being treated badly, which I can't think of any moral ground you can argue that Peggy berating Bill to move Pyramid Scheme chocolate is anywhere justified. And so yeah, she constantly puts him down so he can sell product and burn himself out trying to earn her praise. Remember when she fell out of a plane? Remember when she was trying to earn her Substitute Teacher of the Year award? All that goodwill is really just kinda out the window at this point. At least she shows some kind of remorse when she sees he popped a blister, but it just seems like too little too late. The damage is already done. Like, the episode ends with Peggy apologizing for abusing their friendship, but let's not forget how creepy Bill was when Hank and Bobby were out of town just last season. It's perfectly okay for them to have an awkward relationship, but you just don't abuse someone like that. This is just, yeah, no. The worst part is, the episode as a whole isn't bad, it just really destroys a lot of Peggy's likability. She wasn't like this in the first or even second season, this is new. The plot seems like it's slipping on her. Bill of Sales is a painful to watch, but well written, 8 out of 10. Khan is throwing a Laotian New Year's party, Pi Mai. Actually, had to look it up, and sure enough, they're absolutely right. Pi Mai, the Laotian New Year, is held in April. Fascinating little tidbit, it's usually celebrated with things like a beauty pageant, flower picking and washing to adorn Buddhist images, and releasing of animals from captivity since they believe they should be free to roam nature like tortoises and fish. They could have made some nonsense holiday up and no one would really notice, but they actually did put some effort in and it's something to celebrate. Like, they're even celebrating the washing traditions as people are throwing water on each other, and they never draw attention to that tradition, it's just shown shown on screen. So it's nice that they add those extra elements. Peggy convinces Hank to go to the PMI celebration so Bobby and Connie can be together, which really does show they care about him, and it's great. We also got the mention that Ted Wasanasong is a member of the Nine Rivers Country Club. They also announced that Buddhist monks will be coming to the celebration to find the reincarnation of a llama that they believe should be in the area. One of the monks is played by Sun Tak-oh, who most would recognize as the dad in Mulan, which he'd reprise in Mulan 2 as one of his last roles, but he actually had a storied career of over 50 years in television, which is just absolutely amazing. Matt had one of the greatest numbers of one-off appearances up there with actors like James Hong and Mako. The other monks are played by Stephen Root and David Herman, but it's still a great extra touch. He really brings a phenomenal delivery that elevates the episode as a whole. The monks set out ancient artifacts, with one being attached to the llama. Chang, Wasanasong, and Connie are then tasked with choosing their artifacts. Bobby, trying to defuse the situation, picks up a cane and tries to slow Chang down. The problem being, that was the llama's cane. Out of all the canes laid out, he picked the only one used by Lama Songlok. They're convinced he's the reincarnation, which naturally Hank and even Bobby to some degree refute. They call their leader to come back out and double check. Bobby and Connie then try to learn more about Buddhism, and Bobby does do some reading on his own. He starts to meditate, and Hank tries to teach him about Methodism, and even Reverend Stroop actually encourages him to pursue his spirituality in his own way. However, when he finds out that he can't have a girlfriend if he is a llama, he wants to sabotage it to prove that he isn't the reincarnation so he can be with Connie. Connie begs him to take the test for real, and Hank tries to convince him not to take it at all. And so when Bobby walks out and has to choose, he looks over all the artifacts, and when he sees Connie's reflection in the mirror, he chooses her. He had picked her in Songlok's mirror. I think the most important thing in the entire episode is how they never try and make a joke of Buddhism. It's not exaggerated. They don't make Bobby shave his head or put on robes or anything. He educates himself on the religion and tries to learn more about the culture that Connie had grown up in. We even see that while Con and Min are Buddhists, they're Buddhists in the same way Hank and Peggy are Methodists. They eat meat, and they don't necessarily follow perfect practitioners. You don't have to be strict practitioners so long as it gives you some sort of spiritual guidance, or in their case, networking abilities. Where High Anxiety and Hanky Panky were next level writing, Won't You Pee My Neighbor is a masterful character work. Bobby teeters the line of letting that kind of identity go right to his head, but he's always respectful to the monks and is open to learning more. This may be one of the best Bobby episodes of the entire show, and huge shout out to Pamela Adlon for just bringing that husky legend to life in a way only she can. Won't You Pee My Neighbor is one of the most heartfelt episodes of the entire show, and the fact it's sandwiched between Bill of Sale and Hank's Bad Hair Day just feels off. But where else do you put it that it would make sense? I don't need to tell you it's a 10 out of 10 episode. No actor phones in their performance, every character is doing exactly what you think they would, and the direction is top notch. It's a story that could have been exaggerated, but instead it's treated with reverence and dignity. Watch this episode and just appreciate everything going on. I've seen it easily over 15 times, and that ending still brings a tear to my eye. It's an absolute masterclass episode. Hank's barber is going senile and starts messing up his haircuts. They can't all be bangers. Hank's barber, Jack, is played by Brian Doyle Murray, older brother of Bill Murray, and known for all kinds of roles including Knuckles in Flapjack and the Boss in Christmas Vacation, alongside more than a few others. Fun fact, he'd also star in The Good Family, Mike Judge's other animated family series that lasted a whopping 13 episodes. Don't worry, I'll find a time to talk about it. Anyway, Hank gets his hair bleached and Bill offers to cut his hair for him since he is a military barber after all. However, after the haircut, Hank gets an exorbitant bill from the US military and decides to write to his senator to get it expunged. He keeps fighting the issue over and over until the government agrees to dismantle the entire barber program and fires Bill before auctioning off all of his barber equipment and gives Hank a very healthy check for helping eliminate government financial waste. Did you know the US military fails their audit yearly with a margin well into the billions? I bring this up for no reason whatsoever. And so Hank buys back Bill's equipment with his check and the military secretly reinstates him barber/pinball machine technician. The social commentary of the episode is odd, but still poignant to this day, and honestly, the jokes are well written. It's just such a whiplash going from Pee My Neighbor to this in a marathon viewing. Again, these episodes really weren't made with marathoning in mind, but they do have elements that have been referenced in the past. Though I will say Hank's bad hair day kind of commits a cardinal sin of narrative: the undisclosed passage of time. Hank's hair grows out as he waits arguably months for a response back and just throws everything off. Episodes are becoming less and less connected, and while it's not a bad thing, it's just more disappointing than anything. We're going to get a lot more imbalanced seasons going forward because there isn't that constant string just heading through. Characters will have arcs, but the story as a whole has lost that narrative. It's tragic, but it makes sense for a series this old. You don't want an audience lost if an episode that was supposed to air that week gets cut for football and it had critical information for the plot. They steer more and more into the one-shots, and the end of the season is a perfect example of that. Hank's Bad Hair Day is a well-styled 8 out of 10 that showcases some of the symptoms, but is still excellently well-written, acted, and delivers on what it needs to. Bobby wants to go to a summer comedy camp to learn how to make people laugh. Hank shoots the idea down and instead offers for Bobby to come and work at Strickland Propane and observe Hank in his zone. Bobby and Joe-Jack start messing around in the break room when Hank yells at them. Then, after Dale riles up a crowd as just a horrible friend trying to get his hands on a Char King Imperial, Bobby decides to intervene and get the people laughing to distract them until the truck comes with propane-based comedy. That's right, it's a Bobby and Joe-Jack episode, honey. Bobby does such a great job that even Hank is delighted and loves his propane-themed jokes. Bobby gets to put together his own improv group, the Propaniacs, and they do a fantastic job as they tour through the Strickland network. That is, until Joe-Jack slips and starts drinking heavily again and can't do the skits like they promised. Hank tries to step up and ends up embarrassing the Propane Association president, Charlie Fortner, by drawing attention to his adult diapers. Charlie Fortner, still played by Lane Smith from earlier in the season, one of the last bits of continuity we have. After that, Bobby tries to salvage his act by performing at a food court, and when no one laughs at his jokes other than Hank, he turns his attention to his biggest fan to make him laugh. I love this episode, because it's another fantastic Bobby episode that shows his talent is evolving. You can see his inspiration from the stand-up comics he's enjoyed as far back as the defensive driving course, and his love of Johnny Carson. He never lets it go to his head, and you can see how much he loves just making people laugh. He's so genuine, which is why it's so tragic when Joe-Jack ruins it all. Bobby's just a kid trying to bring some light into the world, and the fact that now his dad is actually encouraging this hobby warms my heart. They finally bond over something that Bobby loves. And even that last bit, where you know he can tell his jokes aren't landing in the food court, and he makes a conscious effort to keep going because he's making Hank laugh so hard he has tears in his eyes, might be one of the best scenes in the show. You could genuinely end the series on this episode and be one of the highest points of the entire thing. Meet the Propaniacs is a clean-burning 10 out of 10, and easily one of the best episodes of the series that warms the heart evenly without ever having to taste the heat, so you can focus on the meat. Hank saves the owner of That's Amore from their locked walk-in freezer, and he gives him a free dinner for 4. So Hank and Peggy decide to take Dale and Nancy. Nancy tries to refuse for her Redcorn nights, but John Redcorn wants a night off and they get into a fight. So Nancy, in protest of her fight with John Redcorn, goes to dinner with Dale. That'll show him. The shocking thing is, by the end of the night, Nancy actually finds herself attracted to her husband and doesn't know why. Check out Sir's John Redcorn. It's a really solid song with a wildly creative music video. I gotta plug it somewhere, and it really feels like it belongs here, mostly because a lot of the scenes in the music video are based off of this episode. But yeah, Nancy battles with her feelings as she cleans her sheets and feels like she betrayed John Redcorn. She is a really hard character to support. Like, I get that she's married to Dale, and that's a challenge in its own right, but Dale thinks that Nancy's headaches are because he's been neglecting her, so he drops to his knees and begs for her forgiveness and talks about how amazing she is. It's wild that an episode like this actually shows that Dale is just hopelessly in love with Nancy and he genuinely cares about her. Dale actually has charm and talent when he tries. He's just really, really, really dumb. Nancy tries to take back John Redcorn and he refuses, so Dale goes to apologize to John Redcorn after hitting him with a lamp thinking he was an intruder. Dale actually helps John Redcorn by filing with the Freedom of Information Act to help him get back the land he petitioned for. Dale and John forgive one another, Dale blissfully unaware of what John really means when he's saying sorry. But there is a bit of closure there. And yeah, Nancy tries to go back to having her headaches and sleeping with John Redcorn with Dale's blessing again, not understanding what he's agreeing to, and John Redcorn refuses because he sees Dale as a real friend and wouldn't want to betray him like that. And so Dale and Nancy walk off ready to try and be a married couple. Leave it to this episode to make John Redcorn actually likable. Nancy, I can't imagine anyone really sympathizes with her all that much. If they didn't show Dale as genuinely loving her as much as they did, it would be different. But he really does care about her and shows that she's his whole world. John Redcorn is just doing his own thing, and the way him and Dale bond is actually touching in a way. Again, just held together by Jonathan Joss bringing it all to the role. It's just, yeah, this is an episode. Again, it's uncomfortable because it's written well. Nancy's Boys is a freely informed 8 out of 10. It's a heat wave in Arlen, and so with the drought going on, poor Texans are forced to ration their water. Hank has his water meter checked and gets recommended to get a low-flow toilet since they use half the water. And so Hank does just that, but sure enough, they don't produce enough water and he has to flush multiple times, defeating the purpose of the low-flow toilets. Meanwhile, Con has been bribing the water meter technician and has a lawn lush and vibrant as all get out, while Hank's withers on the vine. Bobby finds out about what Con is doing and starts blackmailing him so he can get front door privilege and get his precious baths. Bobby knows what's up. If Con was keeping his mouth shut about it, it'd be one thing, but he fooled around and now he's finding out. Bobby making Con fear him is great. He doesn't overplay his hand and works like a pro. Anyway, it's illegal to install a high-flow toilet, and Hank has to fight to repeal it. However, Nate Hashaway, played by the still phenomenal Lane Smith, who could make a movie like Son-in-Law with Pauly Shore entertaining, fights him tooth and nail because Hashaway Fixtures supplies all the low-flow toilets, and he makes a mint so he controls the board. Bobby uses his connections with Con to try and get Hank's lawn watered, but gets caught in the process, embarrassing Hank. Bobby was just trying to help, but ol' Icarus and wax wings and whatnot. So Nate tries to blackmail Hank into backing out, which he agrees to do after fighting to allow high-flow toilets one more time and discovering a clause. If he doesn't vote, he can keep the board there, and if they leave, they forfeit their votes. So he wears them down by reading Peggy's column, and sure enough, when they have to use the low flows themselves, they side with Hank and he uses his high flow with pride. See, Peggy's understanding of local laws and everything works great for her character here, and honestly makes the last 10 episodes or so feel like an absolute fever dream. This is the Peggy you love to see. This is a team that can face anything together, and honestly it's just annoying that we still get these really well done episodes where it shows they can write Peggy well. It's just like they choose not to, especially as we head into the end of the season. Flush with Power is a patriotic and well-developed episode that washes away the competition as a solid 9 out of 10. Hank and Peggy go out bowling with Dale and Nancy, but Peggy gets very self-conscious because she has a complex about her size 16 feet. She has bigger feet than Hank, and you can really actually sympathize with her plight. This was well before custom shoes were anywhere close to affordable, which they're still not cheap today, and she's understandably uncomfortable with drawing attention to it. She finds out her feet are getting bigger, and she breaks down thinking she could end up having size 20 feet. And as she breaks down, another large-footed woman stomps her way into Peggy's life to hand her the business card that's going to change her life forever. A doctor who can appreciate a woman with a good soul. Get it? Like the shoe? You don't have to laugh, these jokes are for me. Grant Trimble, the foot-loving doctor, is actually played by Academy Award-winning director Sidney Pollack, who directed classics like Out of Africa, They Shoot Horses, Don't They, and Tootsie. I know what you're thinking, and yes, Quentin Tarantino was making movies at the time, but he was far from the household name he is today. He was too busy being an Elvis impersonator in an episode of Golden Girls. Real talk, you can thank Golden Girls for Reservoir Dogs. It's wild. I don't know what it is about Sidney's delivery, but it's genuinely one of the smoothest performances I've ever heard. It's much like Walter Cronkite in that kind of audible butter kind of way. It hits the ear right up until he talks about how hot Peggy's feet are. Yeah, he runs a foot-based pay site for people to appreciate the larger-footed woman. Peggy, having no idea, agrees to film her feet to help inspire other women like her. Dale and the gang overhear what Peggy was talking about, and they show Hank Peggy's feet website. Bill is concerningly infatuated with it. Hank goes to confront Trimble, and I am so frustrated that Sydney is out here giving this giant, glorious speech defending foot content creation like the auteur he is. Like, I don't stand behind his message, but man, the man was a one-of-a-kind orator. Peggy has such a great self-confidence about her feet now, and Hank hates that he has to show Peggy the website so she understands just what her videos are actually being used for. If she knew and consented, it would be one thing. But this is just cruel, especially for someone we've seen struggle with this as early as season 1. However, Trimble manages to convince her to keep going with it, and so she lies to Hank and starts going behind his back and sees that Grant is obsessed with just pushing the foot and food angle. When she starts getting suspicious, he offers to pay her for their videos, and she storms out and starts to spiral all over again. And when she's at her lowest point, she talks to Bobby, who admits that he's fat, and that's okay. That he likes who he is, and has people that love him for who he is, which inspires Peggy to start to walk with pride. Even having the episode end right back at the bowling alley where she proudly announces her shoe size. I had to double check and make sure Sydney didn't direct this episode, because man oh manity! I don't revisit this episode often, because I always remembered it as the foot episode, but it really is greater than the sum of its parts. That Bobby line as a larger kid most of my life helped me come to peace with who I am. Sure, I still try to eat healthy and exercise, but if I got some extra cushion, hell, that doesn't mean I'm not undeserving of love, and neither are you. We're just ourselves, and our harshest critic will always be on our own mind, and I think that's perfectly encapsulated here. This is an episode so brilliantly written, directed, and voiced that it's mind-boggling it's coming this late in a whirlwind of a season. I mean, I can't fathom it. Transnational Amusements presents Peggy'sFeet.com is a size 10 out of 10. Peggy sent song lyrics to every country music star she could think of and heard back from Randy Travis, who thanks her for submitting it but rejected it all the same. It's our first season finale since season 1 that isn't a two-parter. There is no cliffhanger, there is no will they make it out, it's just a giant, star-studded affair. I'm gonna shotgun these because there's a lot. Charlie Daniels, played by Charlie Daniels. Brooks and Dunn. Clint Black is back with Lisa Hartman Black. Terry Clark. Winona Judd. Vince Gill plays Pastor Larry. Martina McBride and Bob Loblob himself, Tony Danza, playing himself. Oh yeah, and Randy Travis, played by Randy Travis, who proceeds to steal Peggy's song and uses it, and no one believes her when she tries to call him out on it. Peggy takes over the church bus trip to Nashville for the giant country music celebration. Connie gives Bobby a phone card so he can call her, and when he calls, Con lies and tells him Connie is spending time with Chang, and Brooks and Dunn know a lie when they see one. Randy gets decked by Peggy, who shows how passionate she is about her songwriting. Randy then goes on to take Peggy's inspiration for her song and uses it as his own. Imagine agreeing to play just the worst version of yourself. Peggy gets upset that no one believes her that Randy stole her song, and Hank honestly brings up a lot of good points. She's taken over the trip, spouts facts as if she came up with them on her own, and these are things she's been doing for entire seasons. It's very much the Peggy who cried wolf, and she has to prove that he did in fact steal everything from her. Now that being said, while Hank brings up valid points, he was right next to her when she was telling Randy all the things he then went on to steal. Had he not been there, it'd be one thing, but there's no way that wouldn't be just a smidgen suspicious to him. Anyway, she goes to TP Randy Travis's trailer and ends up causing it to slip into the swamp with Randy trapped inside. Hank swims out and saves Randy from his watery grave that Peggy inadvertently doomed him to, and he's understandably upset. Peggy brings an apple brown Betty, the same kind that put Kix Brooks in the hospital, when Bobby paid his kindness back with it. Hank agrees to eat the brown Betty to prove that it isn't poison, but it was made for Randy Travis, and Peggy tries to stop him. He eats it anyway, and Season 4 concludes with Hank and Peggy walking off as Randy Travis sings. Peggy's fanfare is a complicated finale. As a viewer, you are getting just an absolute powder dump of country music's who's who putting on a downright dynamite performance as they parody themselves. Something that shows at least some of them were true fans of the show and just wanted to be on for the sake of being on. You gotta be something special to get Randy Travis to agree to play a character like Randy Travis. As a critic, you just want to scream at the TV that yes, Peggy is that unhinged and has ego trips constantly, but you just gotta shrug and go, that's King of the Hill. At the end of the day, sometimes a season finale is just like a fireworks show. Is there substance? Does there need to be? You got some of the biggest names in music joining your favorite characters for a wild 23 minutes of fun. Does it spit in the face of the growth Peggy had at the start of the season? Yeah, sure, but that doesn't make it bad. As far as I'm concerned, Peggy got concussed on her fall and she's just turned into an entirely different person that sometimes lapses into her old self. That's my headcanon and I'm sticking to it. Peggy's fanfare is an episode that King of the Hill has earned over 4 seasons. It's a celebration of the show's cultural impact to have it surrounded by the powerhouses of country music at the time, which their key demographic was obsessed with. Peggy's fanfare is a smooth ballad and one terrific 9 out of 10 that wraps one wild season. And there we have it, that's season 4! Anything you think I was right on? Wrong on? What was your least favorite episode? Most favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and let your friends know we're out here. Season 4 is, woof, what a whirlwind. Where Season 1 built the family, Season 2 built the world, and Season 3 looked to the future, Season 4 just ended up being good King of the Hill. I guess if you had to call it a season of something, it would probably be reconciliation with the reality of the future. Now, does it have any grand sweeping cliffhangers or anything left to wrap up? No, not really, but we got some absolute bangers of episodes from this season. Whether it was a masterful 2-parter, a spiritually sound Bobby smorgasbord of quality, or an episode about feet that had no right being as good as it was, Season 4 gave us some of the best and some of the most bland King of the Hill has been yet. Though I will say, there's been more solid episodes this season, and even looking back, I kind of miss my journey through Season 4, knowing what's in store for the future. Now, it's not a bad thing, we're still not even halfway through the show, but Season 5 just doesn't have the consistent peaks of 4. There's still a lot to love, but with a shorter season order, no 2-parters, and one of my least favorite episodes of the entire series, it's not exactly a perfect season. So, all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay strong, keep fighting that good fight, and know I believe in you. And I'll see you all next time when we take a dive into Season 5. Goodbye, everybody. You matter.